Welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. This is the place where we help average givers become everyday philanthropists. I'm your host, Andrew McNair, a financial commentator, author, nine-figure wealth manager, and philanthropist too. I'm going to show you how to give more, how to find more fulfillment, and help you impact the causes that you care about the most. Because when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. And I'm really excited about today's show about raising givers. And if you're a parent or one day you want to be a parent, this show is going to be something you want to save to make sure that you are leading your kids and training your kids to be great givers. And our special guest needs very little introduction. He's a family expert, psychologist, a New York Times bestselling author, author of over 60 books, author of Birth Order, author of Have a New Kid by Friday. Dr. Kevin Leman, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. This is going to be a good time.
Well, as you know, I'm a big fan. I didn't even know that you actually wrote the book, The Way of the Shepherd, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I definitely have recommended it.
It's a wonderful, concise book for people who want to be leaders. You don't drive sheep. If you drive sheep, they scatter. You got to lead them.
Amen. Well, today's show is about raising kids that are givers, and it may be like shepherding sheep, and probably more like shepherding cats. Sometimes that's what most families probably feel like. That they have these aspirations of being this great parent. They've put this imaginary great parent, perfect parent on a pedestal, and they want to live up to that. But I know this show is also going to be about delayed gratification. And that's what I believe that kids need to learn these days. So many times I've witnessed adults that really have these childlike characteristics because they've never grown up with and raised their children to have delayed gratification. So when they become adults, they've never used that muscle of delayed gratification. So I think we have a really great topic today.
Yeah, let's start with the basics. We have seen the enemy, and they are small, and they are unionized. When they come out of mommy's body, they're born. The very first thing they say ought to give us a clue of where kids are. Wee, wee. And they're born hedonistic. They have no social interest in anybody. They just want to be taken care of. And any mommy who's had a little baby laid across their breast at birth, she sees that little lip quivering. I mean, she falls in love with that child, and that's where it starts. And we talk about training up children. Well, most of us, quite frankly, don't train up children. We train down children. We talk down to them. We tell them who they are and what they need to be. And I remind people all the time that these kids, they're all different. That firstborn, that middle child, that youngest child, they are night and day different. All these cubs seem to come out of the same den, but look how different they are.
And the only thing that they really have in common is they have sin like we all do. I mean, kids are not naturally generous. I mean, what comes to mind is that Nemo scene, Finding Nemo, where all the seagulls are, chanting, mine, 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 mine. And that's what will happen with a child if they never have any financial training or generosity training.
That's right. They're hedonistic little suckers, to put it in different verbiage. Okay. Our job is to help guide that little sheep. Okay. And to use the analogy of the rod, the rod was used to count the sheep, to separate the wool from the sheep. In the Christian community in particular, people see leadership in the family as, hey, I'm the boss. I call the shots. You're going to do what I tell you to do. And all of us probably grew up in authoritarian families. I sure did. My father was Irish Catholic. He had an 8th grade education. He'd say things like, hey, 8 o'clock, and he'd point. And that meant you moved to bed. Now, if you didn't move, he'd say, you want to be ricocheted to bed, or do you want to go into your own power? But the point was you went to bed. Well, I remind people, God is not an authoritarian, but he is the supreme what? Authority. His scripture says every knee shall bow. So we teach kids gently about what's important in life. And if you're too strong, your kid's going to rebel. If you're too rural oriented, your kid's going to rebel. But check this out, Andrew. If you're too permissive, that child will also rebel. So the secret sauce of parenting is to be in healthy authority without being an authoritarian, without being permissive. And I'm telling you, kids can work you. They know our soft spots. They can drive a wedge between a couple. And again, they're hedonistic by nature.
And I've heard you use this analogy before, and I think it'd be enlightening, is you don't want to start teaching your children too late in life about stewardship and generosity and have good financial training too late. Many times kids don't lack capacity, they lack teachers. And you use the analogy of wet cement. Can you talk about that?
I love that concept because as a kid, we used to love in the summertime in Buffalo, New York, if you could find somebody laying a sidewalk. Oh man, when those workers weren't looking, we were there with a stick. We were putting our initials in it, or the girl's initials we fell in love with at age 9. Kids are like that. It doesn't take long for that cement to harden. One of the few things you'll get psychiatrists, psychologists to agree on is that personality forms in the first 5, 6 years of life. So there's no reason why a 3-year-old can't help you around the house, can't help unload the dishwasher. Kids should be introduced to allowance early in life. The Bible, if I remember right, mentions money 109 times. So money's important.
It's a very topic that's brought up all the time, and so many times we neglect it.
Yes. So you teach kids about stewardship, about giving to other people. And, I've got 5 kids, and I don't mind telling you that, we had a little surprise. I don't know if anybody out there has had a surprise, but we had our 3 kids, and then we had a surprise. And it was like we had a mascot in the family. My wife was 42, I was 44. But just to show you God has a great sense of humor, we also had the shocker at age 48.
Wow.
That was a little different scenario. But all those 5 kids, Andrew, are givers. Did that happen by happenstance? No, it came from deliberate training from mom and dad.
And
And
training up a child is such an interesting word to use. Is train.
yes, it is. Our little daughter, Lauren, she's the youngest one. She's now 30. When she was in 4th grade, I remember the moment she came home and told me she needed spikes for the softball team in 4th grade. Now, I played baseball. I was a college baseball player. I thought I was really pretty good. The Yankees offered me $45,000 for a contract, but I couldn't get that much money together. So it never happened. But anyway, she was the only one on the team that played in her sneakers. Could I afford the $60? Absolutely. I chose not to do that. I think for people who have a few bucks in their back pocket, I think it's really difficult to discipline yourself, not to give kids things. The things that your kids need is love, consistency, a sense of I love you just the way you are, as Billy Joel once sang years ago. That unqualified love really speaks to how God loves us. In fact, once you receive Christ in your life, here's the funny thing. The sin you're going to commit this week, Andrew, it's already forgiven.
Hey,
Before the week starts, it's forgiven. That's how much he loves us. And so as we love our kids, it's really easy to cave in. These kids are powerful little suckers. When a kid throws a temper tantrum in a mall because he doesn't get his way, what's he really saying? He's saying, hey, wait a minute, mom and dad, I'm an authority over you. And what St. Paul clearly teaches us is that we are an authority, not authoritarians now. We are an authority over our children. So we have to model that giving. They have to see us. We tithe our money. I don't mind telling people that. We look for ways of giving, blessing people without any acknowledgement whatsoever. It's not always easy to do it that way, but it's great. It sure feels good inside.
From your book, I picked up have a new kid by Friday. This book in particular, you say that's so important to be consistent. And how does that look for a parent with money and giving?
Well, you know, you're familiar with GoFundMe things.
Yes.
Um, in Buffalo, New York, I had a GoFundMe. It was called Shoveling Driveways in the Wintertime.
In Buffalo, New York.
Yeah. Today we snowplow the roads of life for kids. I think the allowance is a great teacher. Um, and for young kids, you start off with nickels and dimes, and they understand, you know, the concept of what a dollar is. And of course, today you can't get anything for a dollar, but giving kids an allowance on a predictable day, now you're building structure in. And let's say the kid misspends his allowance, and this is a Friday night. The kid's broke, but he needs this. He wants this, and you say, "Well, honey, use your allowance." And the kid says, "Well, Daddy, I spent all my money." Well, honey, tomorrow's Saturday. Tomorrow's payday, not today.
Mm.
Now, again, what did you say? Delay gratification. That's a basic building block in raising a kid who cares about other people.
So true.
It's just not about you.
It's so sad, and I'm going to steal politely, and he wouldn't mind if I did. Is Jim Rohn once talked about, training up a child with money, and he said so many times parents say, "Well, it's their whole dollar. I mean, they're just kids. Let them spend the whole dollar." And he always joked, "When would you like that to end? When they're 50 and broke at retirement?" Again, kids shouldn't spend their whole dollar. And we're going to talk about some tangible ways to do that. But I think you're spot on because comfort doesn't build character. I mean, it doesn't. If we make it too easy and snowplow life for them, when they finally reach difficulty, they're not going to have the tools built in and the structure to know how to handle it.
I think it was King David who said, if there's not sacrifice, it's really not a gift. We need to teach kids that,
Mm.
that we go out on our tradition on Christmas Eve has always been that we go out and the grandchildren are the ones that give people envelopes of money, hand warmers, socks. We have a whole food. We do it upright. All the kids come, and they've done that since they were little. And when we're home, we're all 5 kids were home this Christmas. Once again, we hit all the parks. I think it's important for kids to see that everybody doesn't live in a 4-bedroom home with premium Wi-Fi. You know what I'm saying?
Right. That's right. You also have recommended that parents do what they say. I mean, how does that look with regards to giving? Do you have any other examples?
Well, that's consistency. It's how we spend our money. It's the kids watching us uh, share from our overabundance of what we have with other people. It's a daily process. It's not something that just happens, for example, on Christmas Eve. Okay. You don't check the box. You're always doing that. You might find this amusing, but I go through McDonald's early in the morning, almost every morning. And this morning, the lady who gave me my bill for $1.40 for my medium coffee got $1 just for smiling and greeting me in such a nice way. And the guy who always says, "Be safe now," when he hands me my cup of coffee, he gets $1 every day. Sunday morning, I was there and I said, "You know what? Today's a special day. It's the Lord's Day. You're getting $3." He didn't want to take it. I find little ways of trying to bless people's lives. It's an introduction to telling them that life isn't all about you and other people care about you. I think that's the real ministry for believers as we're out there in the world. I mean, the real ministry of the church it doesn't really happen in the church when you think about it. It happens when we go outside the church into the real world and people notice somebody's a little different.
I've been
Look
to
at you, you're
church.
different.
Well, I've been to the churches that they say you're now entering the mission field. When you walk out of the church, that is the mission field. And to raise children that see those evangelistic opportunities and are watching you manage your money, to see one, you teaching them about evangelism, also teaching them how to manage money is such an important idea. And sadly, I think, and my parents even talk about this, that their family never talked about money. It was like taboo to talk about. So in some ways, they said we didn't really have the tools because it was never talked about. Maybe because some set of the parents were very embarrassed, and the other set of parents maybe just didn't think it was the children's business to know. And sadly, they're watching. And kids are good at not only watching what you're saying and listening, but they're really close watching what you're doing.
A long time ago, Andrew, I sort of woke up and I I taught myself to be happy for other people's success.
Mm.
As a business guy, I love to send a short note, not an email, a note with a stamp on it that says, "Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for your involvement with this. Appreciate your gift. Appreciate your thoughtfulness." In our schools, we call that vitamin E, which is encouragement. And so when you raise kids, you have to give them a lot of vitamin E, but they also need vitamin N, which is no. And that helps rein the kids in. It helps you as a parent be a parent that's an authority and not an authoritarian or not a permissive. Today's parents, here it is in a nutshell. "Hey, would you kids turn that music down? I'm trying to finish your homework." You tell me. I mean, I did an op-ed for Fox News in New York um, on these starlets in Hollywood who paid over $500,000, some $1 million to get their kids admitted to prestigious universities. Now, you tell that to a donkey, Andrew, he'd kick your brains out. There's something wrong with that picture, big time. So
And
it's crazy what's happening today in our country. And I'm thankful for people like you who are making sense to parents, especially in the financial area. It's one that it's important. Money's important. Finance is important. How we conduct our life and how we spend that money is important.
I think you're spot on. I think we're seeing this in culture where so many children are struggling with anxiety and depression, and they have what the world would say you have everything. You live in a first world, you have all these first world amenities, yet they're less happy than their counterparts in the same age of children that are living on dirt floors. And I think it's because they don't have the vitamin N, but they don't have this gratitude. And if you had gratitude, I believe it's very hard to have anxiousness. It's hard to be depressed when you're so grateful for what you already have and you can see the need that other families have that's greater than yours.
A couple of things on that. Number one, teach your kids to be grateful. Number two, you be the person, parent, you want your kid to be. Don't get so caught up with the outside of your kid. Kids get weird about age 12. They enter adolescence, and they will say things to you just to get your attention. You know, when your kid says something really stupid, and well, let me speak to every woman who's listening. Is your husband capable of saying something just absolutely butt stupid? Oh, I can see the women shaking their head. Yes, he sure is. The next time he says something really stupid, just look at him and go, wow, wow, fascinating. You know what? I found out that kids and husbands have an awful lot in common. Okay. And we don't like questions. Ladies, listen to what I'm saying. Your husband, I'm going to say this as nicely as I can, he hates your questions. Okay. If you want your husband to talk, say, "Andrew, I would love your opinion about something." Andrew will talk your ear off because the Andrews and the Kevins of life have opinions. If you want your kid to talk, okay, and here's the riddle. How was your day today at school, honey? Fine. What'd you do in school today? Nothing. And then what does your 10-year-old do? He goes to his bedroom. He closes the door, locks it in 4 places. and begins to text his buddies like a woodpecker that's got a bad case of ADHD. And he will systematically begin to shut you, parent, out of his life. So you need to get behind his eyes, her eyes, see how they see life. And you have to treat them that, hey, this is your home. So the 14-year-old, the 16-year-old, you have conversations like this. Hey, Friday night, I don't know what you got planned, but if you ever want to invite some buddies over, I'll be glad to spring for the pizza and wings. Mm. Make your home comfortable. Don't get yourself in a 180-degree difference in your son or your daughter. So when a kid says something a little off the wall, how about this? Tell me more about that. And by the way, when you say to your husband, tell me more about that, that's a command, but it doesn't put up the defenses. But when you ask them why, the defenses automatically go up. So you want to keep these conversations with your kid open, because they're going to hear things at school that are way far left, that, are just absolutely wrong. Don't jump on them. Listen to them. Let them explain. And then tell me more about that, or that's interesting. And then maybe getting the kids to do a little research on their own about what they brought home from school, because lots of times it's 180 degrees different from what's truth.
That's so true. And if we just allow culture and school to manipulate our children like wet cement during that stage, I mean, if you follow the world's advice about money and giving, we know the statistics. The average American spends 92% of their money on themselves. They give 2% or less if they give at all, and they invest 6% or less. So we can't let the world condition them and form this wet cement, because once it's hardened, it's a lot harder for them to learn new tricks. So, and this is maybe an offensive analogy, is so many times we point the finger and say, look at my child, what is wrong with my child? It's just like we point the finger and say, what's wrong with that dog? When we should say, it's the parents and it's the dog owners that need the obedience training, because they can, again, shepherd. And if you're not living it out and you're not shepherding, maybe that's why you're getting the results you are from your children.
Yeah. And let me make this point. I'm a speaker. I speak all over. And usually when I'm at a new event, somebody's going to say to me, "Oh, Dr. Leman, we're so glad you're here, because we too want happy, happy, happy children." Let me quote myself from the book, Have a New Kid by Friday. And if you're sitting down, stay seated. An unhappy child is a healthy child. You heard me right. An unhappy child is a healthy child. Folks, there's times your son or daughter needs to be unhappy. Why? Because they were disobedient, because they smacked their sister, they stole something, they lied, whatever. It's called discipline. And if you love your children, you will discipline your children. Mm. And so the home is probably the best place in the world for your kid to fail. The Christian home is the best place for that kid to fail. So then we're not demanding perfection. We know who the perfect one was. It's not us. So as you become vulnerable, and parents, when was the last time you said to your kid, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, I misspoke"? You need to show, you have to model the fact that I don't have a life's answers all in my back pocket. And dad can misspeak, and so can mom. You see what I'm saying? You establish what I call equality with your son or your daughter.
I think there's great wisdom there. Now, for the parent who has done well financially, maybe they have a high income, they have a high net worth, and they're worried that their children will grow up ungrateful and spoiled. What would your recommendation be?
Well, I love what Shaq said. He said, "Yeah, I told my kids, I'm rich, you're not." I still laugh thinking about Shaq. I was with him once. The man is a massive man. Man, he's huge.
But he's
Um,
also this massive generosity of a person. I mean, wherever he goes, he tries to make someone's day better. And I'm sure his kids are learning that through osmosis by being around him. But also, they're not learning that his money is their money. And if you're not careful as someone that has wealth and has income, sadly, you could grow these children that don't want to ever get off the family payroll. And I see that. I have some people I know that are just waiting for their grandparents and their parents to die, and you don't want to raise children like that.
yeah, no. You know, I go back to my daughter Lauren, who didn't get spikes. There were kids on the fourth grade softball team who had hand sewn bags for their equipment. I mean, it's crazy. It's overkill. You know, for those of us who grew up poor, like I did, I mean, we didn't have a family car for most of my upbringing. We rode the bus, and my mother, God rest her soul, she hitchhiked rides with us to go to Sunday school when we were little kids. And by the way, I should tell you this: if there was one thing I didn't ever want to be in life, it was a Christian. That's a whole nother story. Sometime we'll do a podcast on that. I
Certainly.
met my wife in the men's room of a hospital when I was a janitor after I got thrown out of college. I mean, it's a story. You'd think I made it up, but it's the God's honest truth. But anyway, I better not get off track here. But um,
No, I think you bring a good point because some families they didn't have a background of wealth, and they actually have some opportunities for the parents because there's parents listening right now that have not done well financially, and you have great opportunity to share with them mistakes that you've made. My parents were so wise in that they were never shy enough to say, hey, we haven't made all the right decisions financially, and don't make the same mistakes that we've made. Don't wait to save, don't wait to give. And those were lessons because they were vulnerable and they were genuine that they shared with us. So I think there's definitely for the parent that has a lot of wealth and means, you have a lot of work cut out for you. And for the parent that doesn't have any means, you do have your work cut out for you too. Both parents have just a different struggle.
yes, it, how do you say this best? If you have a lot of money, you really have to use discernment and make sure the things you're giving your kids are not material things.
Mm.
You're giving them your time. You're listening to them. You have fun together as a family. Those are the ingredients your kids needs. My father, he was so funny. He'd say to me when I was in private practice as a psychologist, he'd say, "Hey, Kevin, you got any customers today?" I said, "Dad, they're not customers. They're clients." He says, "Do they pay you money?" I said, "Well, yeah, they do pay me money. He said, they're customers." But, you know, being poor and God has blessed us in so many ways. My life was a miracle. Maybe I should tell you part of that because I couldn't get in college because I graduated fourth in my class in high school. Well, what do you mean you couldn't get in college? Well, it was fourth in the bottom, not fourth in the top. That was the problem. So I couldn't get in the University of Buffalo night school. Our own church denominational college in Chicago, Illinois turned me down. I even sent them scripture about forgiveness. That didn't work. And, the reality is, at that point in my life, I couldn't care about scripture. I had no relationship with God. I went off to college. I finally got in on probation. A year later, they threw me out for stealing the conscience fund, which is too long of a story to tell you, but it was a prank. It was a prank. I still think it was very funny. The dean of students didn't think it was funny. The miracle of that statement, the dean of students didn't think it was funny, is 10 years later, I was a dean of students
Hmm.
at the University of Arizona. And when I got thrown out of college, I came down here to Tucson, where I still live, and I got a job as a janitor in a hospital. And I was working there about 18 months, and a 5'9" woman walked down the hallway in a little pretty yellow uniform with white sneakers. And I can show you what happened because this is a male trait. Watch this. Who is that? And I paid another janitor $5 to introduce me to that young woman. That same day, I'm swabbing down the men's room of the hospital. And who should walk in the men's room but my wife to be helping a little guy, an old guy, go potty.
Mm.
And I was always good at saying stupid things. I said, would you like to go to the World's Fair with me? Well, the World's Fair was in New York City at the time. This is Tucson. And I'm making $195 a month. And she said, well, I don't know. I said, how about lunch then? We went to McDonald's, split a 20-cent cheeseburger and 10-cent Coke. And I'm telling you, Andrew, I fell in love. I mean, I was in love. 3.5 months later, she pops the question and she says, would you like to go to church with me? I remember thinking, oh no, she's one of them. If there's one thing I didn't want to hook up with, it was a Christian. And so I remember sitting in her church thinking, no chick's worth this. And then she wanted me to come back at night. Why do you have to come back at night? Didn't do it right in the morning? But anyway, long story short, that's when I met Jesus Christ on a Sunday evening. And everything that happened that night, this sounds crazy. I didn't want to have happen, but it happened. And God gave me motivation. I went back to school, became a dean's list student, became a dean of students, got a doctorate degree, written 67 books. So with God, all things are possible. And I think as parents, you got to remember that these kids are not perfect. And your job is to love them just the way they are. Does it mean you let them run over you? No, that's the vitamin N part. But you need a good balanced way. And consistency is just so important. Because when the kids live with you, they know who you are. So if they see one kind of a person on a Sunday morning, another kind of person the other 6 days of the week, I got news for you. They're going to see through you real quickly.
A lot of wisdom there. For the parent that has a lot of means, who've done well, who has a high income, high net worth, I would tell you that it is so important to anchor your children, to show them what happens to families that spend everything they make. And Jim Rohn tells this story and he says, but if you're already on that side of town, just show them around. And so you have to realize that you have to show them what it's like to live by spending everything on yourself, and that results carried out throughout your life are going to cause you a lot of pain and suffering. And so I want to share with you some things that I recommend to parents that can really help you disciple and deposit seeds in your children's life about money and proper stewardship. And so from these age ranges, if you have a pen and paper, aren't perfect. But I think even starting as early by 5 to 6 years old, you can get them a very simple piggy bank. It should be labeled 10, 20, and 70. And if it's 3 different colors, even better. I remember when my parents were super wise enough to give me a piggy bank, and that was 10% to give, 20% to save, and 70% to spend. And it started to train my brain, even at a young age, that money should be separated, and it had 3 purposes, that I couldn't spend it all. So as early as you can, get your child a piggy bank with 3 different slots. That's the first tip. From ages 6 to 10, let them help you tithe. If you're going to give to your local church, let them put their money that they have in allowance into the tithing plate, and show them your tithing into the offering plate, to show them structure and to show them your generous spirit. Age 12, and this is really hilarious, but I've done this with my nieces and nephews. I invest and bribe into their financial education. I buy them books on finances, and I put a check in there unsigned. And I tell them, if you read this book, I will pay you to read this book. And the beauty is, some of them do. And it's great that my nieces and nephews are reading books that I wished I would have read at their age. And so I deal with grown adults every day who have never read anything about their finances and how to manage their finances better. And that is really sad. At age 14, I would get them out working as young as possible. We have too many lifelong students out there and wonder why the recent generations are late bloomers. It's because they're going to school till they're 25, 28 years old.
That's the truth. Yeah.
And then age 15, I would encourage them to start a business. Not everyone's going to start a business, but there's so many great things about just starting a simple business. Even if it fails, they can learn so many lessons from failure. No one wants failure, but on the other side of failure is a lesson. And some of the best lessons can be taught in failure. And then the last thing I'll mention is at age 16. If they really want to buy a nice car, show them all the nice cars. Help them buy that nice car, but help them understand that they're going to be paying for half of it. That you will start a car matching fund, that you will help them pay for that car, but they're going to have to fork out at least half of that. And that's starting to train them that they're one day going to have to put money in a 401k where they'll get hopefully a match there. And all of these steps will start to train up that child while there's still wet cement there.
Yeah, isn't that good? I remember getting our kids stock. And I love what you said about get a job at 14. I was a caddy at a country club in Buffalo, and I had a fruit stand. Unfortunately, my father put me out of business one summer. He had a few too many brewskis. He ran over my fruit stand. He put me out of business, but we laughed about that for years. He was a man who came to Jesus, by the way, when he was 56 years old.
Wow.
But anyway, we learn and we live, we make mistakes, but what we're talking about right now, parents, is really important. You want to train kids that money is important. It's not our God. It could be used for all kinds of things, but being consistent and showing kids the tithing and the 10, 20, 70, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I would ask you this question, Andrew. If the average person today, and we know Americans don't save, but if the average worker today put 10% of their salary away every week, just how wealthy would they be at age 50?
They would do so well financially because it creates that principle of putting things in the right order, putting God first, then their savings, and then their spending. And that's the first step, is just getting people to flip that perspective that I just don't spend and then save, then give. And financially, they'd be well off. And remember that Social Security was never meant to be the whole, point of your retirement. It was not the whole entree of your retirement. It was always meant to be a supplement. So if we don't want to raise children that are dependent upon the federal government, we have to teach them to save for themselves. And unlike previous generations before, they have it harder. There's no pension. There's an underfunded Social Security. So you want to raise givers and spenders. And the good thing is you can teach those concepts at the same time.
Yeah, amen to that. Again, I think today we've just missed the whole point of being a good parent. Again, if you can teach your kids to be grateful, that's such a good thing.
Mhm.
And don't worry about the little things. I would worry more about your kid's heart than how he wore his hair or his dress or whatever. They're weird. I mean, kids get weird. Jim Dobson called it the canyon of inferiority. The kids sail along pretty smoothly in life, and all of a sudden they hit age 12 or 11, they get weird on you. But listen, when a kid slams the door, okay, when your kid rolls their eyes, what do most parents say? Hey, don't you be rolling your eyes in this house, young man. Don't you slam the door. Hey, let me give you a Kevin Leman response. The door slams. Honey, I'm not quite sure what that slam door just meant. Does that mean you're sick of living in this 4-bedroom house with premium Wi-Fi and other amenities? Just checking. In other words, they're kids.
Mhm.
Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Okay.
Yeah, certainly. You got to choose those battles.
Yeah. So when a child has a temper tantrum, I always tell young parents, step over the child. There's a great temptation to step on that little sucker. Don't do that. That would get you in all kinds of trouble. But when you step over the child and walk away, the kid's not going to continue the temper tantrum because it was thrown for you. It's a psychological term, quite frankly. It's called purpose of behavior. And so your kid's going to be an attention getter. He's going to get attention positively or negatively. Your kid, if he doesn't get positive attention, he'll become a powerful kid. His mantra in life is, I only count when I win, dominate, and control. Well, tell me what kind of a husband that young man's going to be someday if he sees life as dominating control. I've never heard a woman say, I love the way my husband controls me. And trust me, I've been married for 55 years in a row to the famous Mrs. Uppington, who has the ability to say things to me like this every day. She says, you're not going out like that, are you? Yeah, I'm going out like this. What's the problem? So you got a big spot on your shirt. Only one? Don't worry about it. I'll be back in an hour and a half. You know what? You got to put some humor and some fun in these things we call relationships. And so, guys, be a good husband. You're not hearing me say be a perfect husband. Be a good husband. Honor your wife. Your kids are taking notes on how you treat her. And conversely, ladies, don't run over your husband. There's enough people running over men today. If you waste a half an hour and watch a sitcom, notice how they depict men in our society today. There's a lot of learning going on, quite frankly, in our country, and it's not good. So I know at our school, we really try to teach values and virtues to kids.
I want to hear about the school, but I do have to share a joke. I'll never forget when Jeff Foxworthy said this. You should look it up. He said, when my child throws a tantrum in the grocery store, the grocery store aisle, I just look at him and I say, where are your parents? And I think
I love it.
that's such a perfect response, because you're right. They're trying to get attention from you. So if they know that they can't pull that, they are less likely to probably throw a tantrum. But I want to hear about the school. So tell me about the Academy of Excellence.
By the way, I always tell parents when they step over the child and there's people watching, just say, some people's children, and keep walking. Same thing, it helps. Well, our school, we have 7 campuses in Arizona and Colorado. They are public schools. Most people think that charter schools are not. They're private. No, they're public schools. So we take whatever comes in the door. We're a classical school, which means our kids will study Spanish in kindergarten, Latin in the 3rd grade, logic in the 6th grade. Where most schools will dumb things down, we ante them up. So that kindergarten is reading. They're in a first grade curriculum. Everything's upped. We're historically based. And quite frankly, the great teacher in a classical school doesn't do an awful lot of talking. It's trying to get the kids to be critical thinkers.
I mean, that's what education is supposed to mean, right? To draw out.
Yeah, exactly. So we're an award-winning school. I just wish all my teachers from my high school were alive to see Leman Academy of Excellence. They would certainly think it was a distant relative and not me. But it's been a joy to do what we do. We're a nonprofit. So we work hard at just doing a great job, and people in our community notice it. They love us. Last time I checked, up in Colorado, we have about 600 requests to get into our kindergarten. We're in Parker, Colorado, and next year we're going to build a 2nd school up in Parker, Lord willing. And so it's, I'm the guy with a name on the school. So I'm out there. I was out at the school yesterday, one of our schools here in the Tucson area, and I visited the kindergartners. And I can talk like Donald Duck. So that really, with the kindergartners, I'm a rock star with those guys. But, I was showing a friend, Andrew, our school, and I was in a 3rd grade class. And I said to one of the scholars, we call them scholars, not students. I said, scholars, would one of you do something for my friend, anything, or recite a recitation or whatever? This is an 8-year-old 3rd grader. He says, sir, I will. I said, what would you do for us? He said, I'd like to recite the preamble to the Constitution. I'm telling you, I about fell over. But these kids, I'm telling you, these students, these scholars, they can absorb, they learn quickly. Those little ankle biters, even age 3, 4, and 5, are talking about that wet cement, parents. You want to teach a kid a foreign language? Start about 18 months. It's perfect. So we have high expectations for kids. If you came to our school, and there's a perfect invitation. You ever get to Tucson, I would love to take you around our school, and you would be amazed watching the kids go from class to class. They're not pushing and shoving. In fact, the little ankle biters, when they go from their homeroom down to art or music, they look like little penguins at the South Pole because they got their hands behind their back and they're walking just as nicely and quietly as one could do. So we think that order is important. It's not a strict confining order, but I think teaching kids that there's order in life is important.
It
So
is.
our Veterans Day, I've never gone to one of our Veterans Day programs at school where I haven't found myself in tears. We teach kids that America is great. Our public schools, well, in too many instances, are teaching kids that America is a bad place.
Very backwards.
Yeah, it's just terrible. So we're just the opposite of that. God's blessed us.
How can we get involved? How can we give and find out more information?
Well, if you go on lemanacademy.com, you'll see all of our campuses. You'll see what we're doing. We're a nonprofit. People can donate money to us. I'd love to find somebody here in the Tucson area who'd donate 10 acres of land, and I'd put a school up as soon as I possibly could. There's such a need for this.
Amazing.
I believe someday, I won't live to see it, but I would hazard a guess that Leman Academy of Excellence might become in almost all states. It'll probably never put a brick in New York, Illinois, or California. But I would think the other states got a fair chance to get the Leman Academy. They're life changers. I mean, the testimonies from our kids and our parents, I mean, they love us. And again, we're not perfect. I'm always underscoring that. We make mistakes, and when we do, we owe up to it. And by the way, in the business world, here's something for you. I got to know Herb Kelleher real well, who is the CEO and chairman of the board of Southwest.
Certainly.
But I shared with him this, that company that really just screws you over, to put it bluntly, you're so mad, you're going to call Better Business Bureau, you're going to Yelp them, you're going to do this and do that. When that company does the right thing, research says that that person will take 22 positive actions about that company that they were going to Yelp. Why? Because they ponied up and they made things right.
I love that.
What a great way to live.
It is a great way to live. I want to ask you a couple closing questions. Dr. Leman, if you could write one tweet to parents that would be read by every parent in the world, what would it say?
Well, probably if you rear your kid to feel like they're the center of the universe, in all probability, they'll never experience the joy of knowing God.
Mm.
And that's how we raise kids today, like they're the center of the universe.
And we wonder why they're depressed and anxious, because they're never meant to be the center of the universe. There's already someone at the center of the universe, and it's Jesus. And if they don't center their life and you don't show them that's where they're supposed to center their life, they don't have a North Pole. They don't have a compass that ever always points north. And that's why I think my parents did a great job, is they constantly said, we've messed it up. We are messing it up. But here's a father that hasn't messed it up.
Yeah, I guess if I would have allowed a second tweet, I would just get their attention by saying, praise is destructive with children. And they'd say, what? Praise is destructive with children. God is worthy of our praise. Your children aren't. Would you explain that a little further? Let me give you a clear-cut example. Your kid brings home 5 A's on a report card. And I'm going to be mom for just a second. Oh, 5 A's. I am so excited. I can't wait to tell. Oh, I can't wait to tell Grandma and Aunt Martha this is wonderful. Your dad is going to love this. Oh, I am so proud of you. You're the best kid in the whole world. Here's $20. Okay, what's wrong with that, Leman? It's reward and it's praise. Let me give you a better one using encouragement. Now, listen to the words, parent. Wow, 5 A's. Honey, it looks like all that hard work you put in really paid off. Congratulations. That's super. Fist bump. And guess what, parents? You just saved yourself a $20 bill.
And it ties them to the work ethic that they had, because the results won't always work out in their favor, especially in life. But if you show them that, hey, because of your work ethic and working towards that goal, most of the time it will work out.
Yeah, and the kid takes away, hey, somebody noticed the hard work I did. And hey, for you parents, this is just sort of a bonus for listening to us today. You know, I wrote the birth order book, and many trees died in its honor. And it's a wonderful little book in so many ways. But some of you have kids, I call them bluebirds. They're the little firstborns. They're the ones in class that always have their arm up. You know, they know the answer. And then you have that kid behind that kid. You know, you don't quite know what to do with that second child. Sometimes it's hovering a year or two behind that little bluebird. Let me give you a suggestion. Pull that little second born aside someday and say, honey, could I ask your opinion about something? Now listen to the word opinion. That'll open the door. You know, what about? It's about your sister. What about her? Well, is she a little over the top or is it me? Now, I'm telling you, that kid who's lived in that shadow is going to go, oh, somebody finally acknowledges what I'm up against. And when you're behind a kid just by a year or two, you know, you tell yourself, I'm never going to measure up. I'm never going to be what she is. And my message to parents is you want her to be that kid. You want her to be herself. And you work on loving and looking at the fine points that this kid has in life, the qualities they have that are really worthwhile, and you work on those. But it all gets back to communication, folks. You can do this. I'm telling you, parenthood is not easy. Marriage isn't easy, but it is simple. There's a simple paradigm that works in marriage. There's a simple paradigm that works in parenthood. And we've talked about some of those things today, but you know, I always say, if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know he didn't get there by himself. Now, you answer this question for me, parent. Who had your backside when you were a kid? Now, don't tell me it was 20 people because you're a lying dog. Don't tell me it was 10 people. You're lucky if you had one, maybe two. The average is 1.5, by the way, because I've asked that question all around our country. But what was the quality that that person had who had your back anyway? Think about that. Those are the virtues and values that that person had that we want to take forward and impart to our kids in a non-threatening way. You can do this, parent, I'm telling you.
Dr. Leman, is there a strong belief that you have that really isn't shared by popular culture?
Oh, that's easy. How about this one? Activities are not good for kids. Now, when you hear that, your eyebrows go up. You go, what was that again? Activities aren't good for kids? Well, let me qualify it a little bit. Too many activities are not good for kids. One activity per kid is plenty. I have a chapter in one of my books. I wish I could tell you which book it's in, but I even forgot the titles of some of them. Called Help. I'm a cabbie and my SUV isn't even yellow. And what we do is we run kids from pillar to post. And God help you, parents, if your kid's a great volleyball player or a hockey player or a basketball player, and your kid gets on the city team, your entire weekend is wrapped up in volleyball or softball. And I can tell you one place where you're not on Sunday, and that's in church. Activities, the more activities you get your kids in, the more you dilute your indelible imprint. What I'm telling you is that, Andrew, you and I leave an indelible imprint on our kids' lives. Daddy, daughter, special relationship. Mommy, son, huge. So again, if someone knocked on your door tonight and said, hey, can I take your Toyota? There's an American statement for you. Well, if you didn't know them, would you hand over your Toyota, the keys? Then why do you so liberally hand your kids over to strangers?
That's so good.
I'm just telling you.
And
Hold
so
them
many
forward.
times they're so occupied going from one activity to another activity. I am so thankful for the time as a kid that I didn't know it was happening at the time, that I didn't have any electronics. I didn't have any activities, and I was able to use my imagination. I was be able to create, use creative thinking and critical thinking to have a good time instead of having to go from one activity to the next.
Yeah, Moonhead Deach and I used to go garbage picking. That was our favorite. We would go out the day that people put their garbage out in the summertime. We'd go around, we'd bring home some really good stuff.
What are some common misconceptions that people maybe have about your teachings? What would be some common misconceptions you'd like to clear up?
Well, most people think I live in California. I don't know why. I'm not very California-like. I've been blessed. I have a summer place up in upstate New York where I hide out from people in the summertime. Um, People think I'm filthy rich, and I'm not. When I say we're givers, we're givers. You wouldn't like this because you're a financial guy. I don't have a savings account. I really don't.
I
I
think giving is the ultimate
Yeah, we
test. I
give.
mean, at the end of the day, I don't think when the Lord meets all of us, he's going to ask us what's in our bank account. He's going to say, were you a good and faithful servant? What I have, and were you generous? So that's what matters.
Yeah, and we give, and we model that. And like I said, I got 5 kids who are all givers. I'm proud of that. And they've all, you'd think with 5 kids you'd have a couple of losers in there, but just the percentages. But we've been blessed. All of our kids have done extremely well in life, and they're all different. And God made us all different. I sit on airplanes. I'm always in the first class section, not because I'm snobby or because I'm quote filthy rich, but because I get claustrophobic really bad. And in fact, I quit Good Morning America years ago as their consulting psychologist because they were so cheap. They'd only give you a coach ticket to New York. But I always sit in the front seat on the aisle, and I love to watch people come on. And I marvel at how different everybody is.
Mm.
And God made us all different. I mean, as the guy who wrote the birth order book, let me share this with you. Identical twins have the same DNA. They're genetically the same person. But when I found this out, Andrew, I laughed and I cried. You ever laugh and cry at the same time?
It's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it is. And I laughed and cried. I thought, wow, why did God give identical twins who have the same DNA different fingerprints? Was this to help the FBI, the local police? Or was it God's way of saying, you are my son, you are my daughter, you're what? Different than everybody else. As parents, you got to keep in mind, hey, that firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, fourthborn, whatever, they're going to be different from each other. The Bible teaches us that God knows even the number of hairs in our head. So don't mess with it. Treat the kids differently. Different bedtimes, different allowances. You live in Florida, the state of Florida is going to treat your 16-year-old different than your 13-year-old. 16-year-old's going to be driving. 13-year-olds are going to be wishing. There's the word, delayed gratification. That 13-year-old's going to learn that there are pluses and minuses depending upon your age. There's privilege with your age, for sure.
That's a special message. I'd love for people to, again, get involved and give to the Leman Academy of Excellence. Can you give one more time where they can find those locations and where they can give?
Yeah, lemanacademy.org, Leman Academy of Excellence.com. You can find all the schools there, where they're located. You can look at them, see what we do. We have one school right now in Parker, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver. We're going to put another one up there next year. We have them in Sierra Vista. which is about an hour and a half outside of Tucson. We have 4 schools in the Tucson metropolitan area, which is a metropolitan area about 1 million people. We have one in Mesa, Arizona as well. So we are thriving, we're growing, we want to make a difference. I want to make a dent in American education. If we're making a dent, I just want that dent to increase every year because what we're doing is really short of miraculous.
I love it. We need it.
Amen to that. So people can go on birthorderguy.com and see where I am and what I'm doing.
Good.
I'm not hard to find. I live in Tucson most of the time. And I'm married to the famous Mrs. Uppington. I've nicknamed my wife Mrs. Uppington because she is the one that's the classy one. And I'm the one that, well, I got asked to leave the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Phoenix, Arizona once because I look so bad. I have to tell you, they threw me out in a very classy way. They weren't rude, but they did throw me out. So whoever said that opposites attract, we certainly do that for sure.
Well, as you can tell, he has tons of teachings that you need to find more information on. So please do check out those websites he mentioned and get involved with Academy of Excellence. That's all we have for this episode of Rich, Young, and Powerful. One thing that would really help the two of us out is if you could like this show by leaving a comment and giving it 5 stars and leaving a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast platform you listen to. Also, make sure you find your way to the richyoungpowerful.com website so you can check out our classes, Philanthropy 101. You can check out our book, The Giving Crisis, and make sure that you don't miss another episode of The Everyday Philanthropist on our YouTube channel. So until next time, remember that when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. See you next time.